Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
And take a good look.
Everybody, we are back, Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV. Thank you to everybody who reached out and wondered what was up with our schedule, which got a little chaotic due to some unforeseen circumstances that struck, but we're back. The Breeders' Cup is coming. We're rolling full speed ahead. We've got a lot of great stuff planned for the Breeders' Cup. We are going to be on scene, and you will see things that you will not see anywhere else. That much we can pretty much guarantee. Can we not, Mr. Wilson?
Oh, yeah. John's already said he's going to wear a clown suit at the Breeders' Cup, so you will not see that anywhere.
Right. But that
most of his clothes were swept away in the hurricane, except his Halloween costume. So that's what he's got.
Well, we'll make the best of it, but there were some people out there that think I dress like a clown when I wear my regular clothes. So hey, I could get away with that. That statement could fly.
John, look, I think you could, as Kanye West said, with my ego, I could go out there in a Speedo and be looked at like a hero. So I think you can pull off anything, my man.
That's right. I could wear a Speedo and look like a hero. Well, I don't know. The stage nobody really needs to see that. But we'll be there, and we will have some interesting aspects and perspectives on the Breeders' Cup, and we'll start talking about that on this show. Let's start with something that I think is interesting. Okay. Very first Breeders' Cup. Well, before I get to that, I want to say that the unique thing to me about this year's Breeders' Cup is that we will probably see, and I'm not a stat guy, so I didn't look it up. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm only going off memory, and my memory is not what it used to be. But I think we will see more odds-on, short-priced favorite horses throughout the program than we have in a lot of other Breeders' Cups, maybe all of them. And I think that Flightline in the Classic will be the shortest priced Classic favorite in the history of the race to date, maybe forever. And I think he's going to be shorter than a lot of people think that he will be. And I also think that when it comes to that race and you look at the pick 4, pick 5, and pick 6 payoffs, the difference between his payoff and the second price horses payoff is going to be much bigger than people even realize. So I think he's going to really garner a huge chunk of the money. And I think that, along with the other short price horses, makes it a very intriguing event, not only for the, racing championships and the breeding implications and everything else, but from the wagering side, it's just a very interesting thing. Because if you say, okay, we've got 5 odds-on horses, and the favorites win 30% of the time, let's bump it up 40% of the time, whatever you want. That's 3 of them are going to get beat.
Right.
You,
Right.
can they all win? Of course, but odds are, even though the odds say they're the favorites, but odds are they're probably not going to. And I want to lead into the first classic. I don't know. Do you remember?
I think we got to look at the classic field and just see it. Is our Kang in the race? Is he running?
Our Kong is not in.
No, we don't. We need a 99 to 1 shot. That's what we need, right?
Right.
What was he? He was like 150 to 1. It was
something ridiculous like that. Jerry Bailey, I remember, said he didn't even understand or speak the language of the guy that gave him the instructions in the paddock, which I thought was humorous. But I guess Jerry Bailey didn't really need any instructions when he rode a race. He kind of knew what to do. But I want to go back to the very, very first Breeders' Cup Classic, and I don't know if you remember it. It was won by who was it? Wild Again, was that his name?
Okay, yeah.
And Gate Dancer and Slew of Gold were all across the wire. Now, yeah, I always get Wild Again and Black Tie Affair confused for some reason, and I don't know why. They're two completely different racehorses. But
right.
If you go back to the very first Breeders' Cup Classic, okay, which was run at the no longer around Hollywood Park. Okay, Slew of Gold was the horse that year. Okay, he was at his best a monster. Okay, he had issues throughout his career that plagued him that a lot of people probably don't know about today. But he had foot issues and ran with a bar shoe and an aluminum pad. And I think at some point he might have even run with 2 bar shoes or 2 aluminum pads. But he had issues that plagued him, and they were bothering him and acting up prior to the Classic. But he went on and raced competitively, but lost to 2 horses that when he was on his game and was right, couldn't warm him up. Okay, right. Gate Dancer and Wild Again couldn't warm Slew of Gold up when Slew of Gold was right. Okay, Slew of Gold was also ridden by Angel Cordero that day, who at the time was one of the best riders in the world, is today still one of the best riders of all time, but was known for being a very aggressive, tough race rider, similar to the reputation that Irad Ortiz might have today and guys like that. And it was very rare to ever see anybody outride him or race ride him or bully him on a racehorse. And if you go back to that Breeders' Cup Classic and you watch it, he wound up between Wild Again on the inside, who was running with his head cocked to the outside, kind of intimidating. And Slew of Gold was a big, strong, muscular specimen of a horse. He really was, probably one of the best looking racehorses I have seen in my entire life. And he wound up sandwiched in between those 2 horses, bouncing back and forth in a very intimidating spot, probably not at his best. And I would say that on that particular day, Angel didn't put him in the best spot for him to have the best chance to win. And I think Lafitte Pincay on Gate Dancer on the outside and Pat Day obviously on the rail, who survived the steward's inquiry, both rode better races, which is a rare thing. Point being, we fast forward to all these years later, and we now have Flightline, who we know has some type of physical issue. I don't know exactly what it is. I've heard it's, foot problems. I'm not sure of that. You might know more than I do about it. But, here you have a horse that does have some physical issue that keeps him from racing more often and then, has impacted his career heading into the Classic against horses that if he runs a race like he did in the Pacific Classic, can't beat him. But they still got to run the race. He's still got to get over that physical issue. It's still got to not creep up and bother him prior to or during the race. And, Pratt's still got to ride him and put him in the right spot to do it, to get the job done. So I just think it's a fascinating parallel.
Harrison, yeah.
First one, that first Classic and this Classic. I don't remember what Slew of Gold went off, but he was expected to win despite the issues. And as a trainer, you probably have a lot of insight into this and a lot of better insight than a horse player might have about a horse heading into a race, expected to win and expected not to be bothered by any physical limitations. To me, as a handicapper and a bettor, if I'm going to bet on a heavy favorite, I like not to have to worry about those type of intangibles. There are enough intangibles that are just inherent to running a horse race. Okay.
Right.
To me, that's an extra intangible that is tough to take at 3 to 5 or 2 to 5 or something like that in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic, where the bottom line is most of the horses in there, although they might not be quote Flightline caliber, are good race horses.
Oh, absolutely. I think, as you get closer to a race, your goal is to have your horse the best you can on that day. And I think what typically sets apart trainers who win Breeders' Cup races versus guys who win grade ones throughout the year is you cannot walk into the Breeders' Cup at anything less than 100% and expect to prevail. And, you can look at other races throughout the season, like we could talk about Life is Good coming right off the layoff and stretching 2 turns and winning, right? The first race off of a break. And we talked about how difficult that was. But you could take a horse like him in Life is Good and run him at 75% in a grade one, just knowing he's better and knowing that he'll get better throughout the season, but you can still win. And you see it all the time. And it's interesting, as you would find, class is typically the biggest thing that prevails when you get onto that world championship stage. And I'll make a point, and I don't want to bring it up, but you'll see some of these horses, right? Certain horses that might have been claimed for 10, 12, 5, 30, and then all of a sudden they jump up and they're winning grade one races. And then all of a sudden you get them to the classic and none of them fire. They don't show up. Class is the next step when you hit that level. But the other piece is most good racehorses can win grade ones, not on top of their game. But when you walk into the gate of the Breeders' Cup Classic, most of those guys have made sure their horse is at 100%. So if you walk in at 85, 90, you are giving a huge disadvantage to yourself because everybody else is sitting on 100 with very good horses. And I could say this for people who want to just automatically give Flightline, and again, we've talked about him. He's got phenomenal amount of talent. And if he runs the Pacific Classic race, by all means, he should win. But you have a field in the Classic unlike any other I've seen in a long time. I mean, thinking back to, thinking of a quality Classic field, I'd almost have to go back to when you had Ghost Sapper, Azeri, Roses in May. Who else was in that race? Pleasantly Perfect, I think, was in that race too, where you just had full top to bottom of talented horses. And this is a group where you remove any of the top one, you remove Flightline, you remove Life is Good. These are all horses that any given day of the week could win the Classic. It's not a walkover race.
100%. And I'll tell you, a couple of other interesting observations about the Classic. Okay. Is it realistic to think? I always like to look for horses that are going forward. Okay. Especially for weighting purposes. All right. Is it realistic to think Flightline is going to go forward off the Pacific Classic? I don't think so.
Okay? I think he has to duplicate. I don't know, which it's not going to get better.
I would agree with that. All right. But to expect him to get better is almost inconceivable to me. Okay.
Right.
But you have 2 3-year-olds. Okay. Taiba and Epicenter that both look like they're going to take big step forwards. And I'll come to my training question to you in a minute. But you have those 2 horses that look like 3-year-olds that are going to get better and go forward in the Classic and run the best race we've seen from them to date.
Right.
The other factor with Life is Good, and a lot of people are knocking him, saying, he might not be a 1.25 mile horse, and his last race might not have been as impressive as we'd like to see it in order to say he can beat Flightline. And I'll say this about the mile and a quarter. There are two tracks, in my opinion, in the United States that I think are absolutely no-brainers for what I'm about to say. These two racetracks can get a mile and an eighth horse to get a mile and a quarter. One is Gulfstream Park, the other is Keeneland. I think if you're a mile and an eighth horse, you can get a mile and a quarter at Gulfstream Park or Keeneland, especially if you're a quality animal. So I don't think the mile and a quarter limitation possibility for Life is Good, if he is truly a mile and an eighth horse and, you know, wouldn't get the mile and a quarter. I think that argument is negated by the fact that the race is at Keeneland, because like I said, I think Gulfstream and Keeneland can do it. But the question to you from a training standpoint is, how much of a jump forward can a quality 3-year-old like Epicenter, who got real good in the summer, and like Taiba, who got really good and kind of found himself a little later in the summer, okay? They're both still in their 3-year-old seasons. Now we're moving into November. How much of a forward move can a quality horse like that make? Because what I'm getting at is, can they move forward enough to compete with a Flightline? I mean, or is that too much to ask? Can they jump forward and still just, you know what, they went forward, they ran great, but not, they couldn't really have been expected to go forward enough to compete. So from a trainer, horseman standpoint, talk about that a little bit.
Massively. I mean, what people don't fully understand about our game, and we get a lot of knocks from people in the horse world outside of our sport saying, we run these horses when they're not fully developed. Yes, we do. Okay. We 100% do, but we don't run horses at the detriment, you know, and that's where people in the outside horse world get it wrong. If you gave me a 5-year-old thoroughbred that has never been trained to race, he will never make it to the races. He just won't. He's too big. He's too heavy. You got to do too much work to get the horse fit. It's very unlikely that horse will ever race. So we start our horses when they're 2. And when they're 2, the way you need to look at it is, it's like a teenager starting to lift weights. Okay. So most kids hit junior high and they're weird and they're gangly, and some are fully developed men at that stage, you know, in boys sports, and those guys plateau early and never go on, which we see with 2-year-olds in our sport too. But it's literally like early 2-year-old seasons, like JV sports. Late 2-year-old season is like varsity sports. You know, you're now a junior and a senior in high school. 3-year-old season, your first-year college athletes. Okay. Later in the 3-year-old season, you're starting to go 3rd year, 4th year college athlete, edge of maybe, hey, you're a professional in the NBA as a rookie or 2-year-old. 4-year-old, you're a seasoned veteran. 5-year-old, you're completely developed. You're, you know, 4th, 5th, 6th year NBA. You know the game. You're fully developed. You're 100% on the game, and you've got all that experience to add to it. So, what people don't always get, these 3-year-olds, and we've seen it recently with Kisselot, the horse that we have. He's grown 4 inches since Saratoga. Wow. We took him out of Saratoga, and, you know, I left and came, and we came to the Keeneland September sale, and he shipped in, and I'm like, holy smokes, this horse has grown 4 inches. So there are massive leaps that these 3-year-olds will take from summer to fall, from fall to next winter and spring. And you'll just see this big growth development as these horses change. So it is, Taiba and Epicenter were 2 horses that are extremely dangerous. And John, you and I talked about this. We said Taiba is going to be a force to reckon with come summer. He looked like that type of horse when he was on the Derby Trail. He's shown he's that type of horse. Now, here's the other thing you have to give credit to. He's with a trainer who knows how to win the Classic, and also knows how to win the Classic with 3-year-olds, right? He won with Arrogate, right? He was a 3-year-old. He won with American Pharaoh as a 3-year-old. Bayern, did he win with it as a 3-year-old or 4-year-old? 3-year-old, I think.
I think Bayern was 4, but I don't quote me on it.
So Bob has a record of getting 3-year-olds to be able to beat older boys on the day in the Classic. But yes, John, you're 100% right. you will see a big difference from a 3-year-old in the summer to a 3-year-old in the fall. But you need a specific type of horse to do that. And those two horses are Taiba and Epicenter. If you came to me and you said, hey, Mike, wow, I'm trying to even think right now. Well, prime example, who was champion 2-year-old last year? Who was champion 2-year-old, won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year? Where is he this year, right? He's a horse that peaked early. There are 2-year-olds and there are race horses that peak early. And then I say it in terms of racing, they don't run on at 3. They developed early. And then everybody caught them and passed them and kept running past them. And that's literally, Epicenter has been very good. And Steve Asmussen is one of the best at managing a horse's campaign and keeping them on top of their game throughout an entire campaign. But that horse has continued to mature and get better and better and better. And it's showing with him and with Taiba that those two horses are very much that. So I think, honestly, the 3-year-olds can be dangerous in this race.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't conceded any of the races to anybody. And like I said, what is very intriguing to me, on top of just the excitement of the event and the championships that are on the line and all the drama and the stories, is just that the wagering prospects are phenomenal. There's always a lot of money to be made betting, and when you have heavy favorites like this, it's just it's an interesting dilemma. Which ones do you decide to bank on or single or ride with, and which ones do you decide to beat? And Flightline is going to be one that a lot of people are going to ride with. I haven't made my decision yet. By the time we do our Past the Wire Breeders' Cup seminar, I will have made my decision. So I think this is going to be the best seminar that we've done, bar none. But we'll get to that.
Well, and it's interesting with Flightline in particular. Sorry, and I don't mean to cut you off. We had snow this morning in Kentucky. Right? Wow. At 6 a.m. this morning when I was going to the gym, it was snowing. So it was 38 degrees out this morning. So Flightline is in California. Santa Anita at this time of year is still very hot, right? When you come out of Del Mar and you go into Santa Anita, it's still about 100 degrees out at Santa Anita. You go into the fall and you hit some fall weather, but most horses here have shipped in. The group that came in from Saratoga had winter coats. They'd grown winter coats up in Saratoga. And now they're getting clipped to make sure that, and blanketed for racing over the next couple of weeks. But here's going to be a horse coming out of a very warm climate. And not saying a lot of horses handle that fine, but Life is Good is here. I see him every day. He's at Fletcher's barn's right across from Saffy's barn. Todd's horses are here. A lot of these Breeders' Cup horses, Asmussen's horses are here. I see most of these Breeders' Cup horses training every morning that I'm out there. They're already here, and Flightline is going to have to come into that with horses that have already adjusted to the weather. And every now and again, you get a horse that ships in and gets a little bit snotty nose, gets a little bit of a cough because of that massive change of hot climate to cold climate. Doesn't always happen, but that's going to be a big adjustment as well for horses who have actually, because Todd's horses would have been in Saratoga, then New York, or maybe went straight from Saratoga to here. They've had more time to acclimate to the cooler fall weather on the East Coast that is now riding into a Breeders' Cup that's probably, if it was 38 degrees out this morning, I mean, heck, I might be in a Carhartt suit at the Breeders' Cup if it looks like
wow.
that. Who knows?
I'm glad you're telling me this. Last year when I went to the Breeders' Cup, it was at Del Mar, which is in California. So I thought beach. I was ready to leave the house to catch my flight. I said, you know what? Open up the suitcase. I threw a couple of bathing suits in there. I didn't need them. I was freezing out there in California. Okay. Right. For Del Mar. Friday, Breeders' Cup day, I was literally shivering. So I'm glad you told me this. I'm going to go out and go to like one of those sporting goods stores if I can find anything open, and get me like a snowsuit or something for the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, just in case. Because
you'll definitely need it in the morning.
My blood's thin, man.
The mornings are frigid I've been out there, and even yesterday, and Kentucky is interesting because it's a wet cold, right? So even the other day, I was out at a farm looking at a couple horses, and it was 52. I still needed a winter jacket. So it stays, it gets through to you. Like I did Colorado.
I don't know that I own. I don't
Huh?
know that I own. I don't know that I own a winter jacket. I've been in Florida since 1990. Well, I was in Hot Springs for a couple of years, but I don't know that I have a winter jacket. I'm gonna have to check or get one. But back to the races. Flightline got a dilemma there. Okay, then you brought up an interesting question via text message the other day. Which Pletcher is going to win the distaff? Okay, Nest or Malapat? Nest is a 3-year-old. She, I think, is going to also be a much shorter priced favorite than people expect. I think a lot of people are going to be riding on Nest's back, wagering wise. And my answer to your question is, I'm not sold that either of those Pletcher horses are going to win the distaff.
Right.
I haven't, done the race yet, but there are a couple of other horses in there that I think are a little intriguing and are eligible to bounce back and have run races in their past that are good enough to compete with either of them. But Nest, we have a similar situation that we do with the other 2 3-year-olds on the male side, Taiba and Epicenter. She's 3. She looks like she's just blossoming and getting better and better, and she's winning her races different now. I mean, now when she pulls away, she looks like she's almost got like a turf-like turn of foot when she just runs away from him in the stretch. You know what I mean? It used to be, she would pull away and she was a dominating horse, but now she just like kind of explodes and makes it look easy, So she's another very, very short price horse that's going to have to be dealt with one way or the other from a wagering standpoint. Because what a lot of people don't realize is when you're playing these kind of races, okay, you either bet that horse or you bet against that horse. You can't use that horse and other horses. You know what I mean? You can't use Flightline with other horses. You're either with them or you're against them. You know what I mean? Because if you play it any other way, you're just making a wagering mistake that in the long run is gonna hurt you. You got Nest, interesting, scenario, and I think another one a lot of people are gonna ride with. Then you got the male 2-year-old race where Cave Rock on the racetrack has been completely dominating. And, that's Baffert. We know he loves to win these races. We know he's better than anybody at winning them. And, what an odd situation we would have if Cave Rock dominates and wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Okay. Yeah. He becomes the instant Kentucky Derby favorite, early favorite.
He can't run.
Eligible to run. Well, unless they move him.
They move him, yeah.
But it just becomes a whole interesting dynamic.
Well, and this is an interesting thing, and maybe as a handicapper, you will have noticed this over the years, and it's something that I've always wondered as to why. Right. So, Bob, you can tell at the Breeders' Cup what type of day he's going to have based on how his early runners run. And I've noticed this. Bob wins a couple early, you can pretty much bet that everything else that he has that looks like it's got a shot is going to fire. Now, if Bob has a horse like Cave Rock and that horse comes up empty and tanks, typically, for whatever reason I've noticed, the rest of them don't fire.
It's funny you say that because I've noticed the same thing, and it's not just at the Breeders' Cup, but year-round on the big days about Todd Pletcher. When Todd comes on those big days and he's got one of those short-priced maidens early on the card, and they win easy, usually he's firing all day long. When he's got one of those that doesn't win, then sometimes just not his day. I've noticed that, so trainers can be streaky. When you're hot, you're hot. It's always good to be hot on those big days, but it's just an interesting dynamic. I don't think they would move Cave Rock if he wins. You know, he would be eligible to run into Preakness and into Belmont Stakes because the New York band is over, I think, in January or whenever. So it would be an interesting dynamic to see how that plays out. You know, it's also an interesting dynamic. 3-year-old of the year. Okay, if Tiber wins the Classic, okay, and upsets Flightline and beats Epicenter, you know, I mean, voters are biased. There's no question about that.
Sure, and there's definitely an East Coast bias.
Right, and I would tend to agree with that. And I never was that way. I'm an East Coast guy, but I'd be the first to tell you that Sunday Silence was better than Easy Goer. He beat him 3 out of 4 times. You know what I mean? At the time that Easy Goer beat him, there's a backstory to that Belmont Stakes that a lot of people don't know and a lot of people don't talk about, that I'd be more than willing to share if you want to hear it. But getting back to the bias, if Tiber wins the Breeders' Cup Classic, okay, how is he not 3-year-old champion?
Agreed.
And he might not be. And he might not be because of the bias.
The bias. And that's your next question, right? How is he also not horse of the year? Because if he is to take down the Classic and you're to look at the body of work, and the only horse that I can,
what if Nest wins the distaff?
If Nest wins,
there's other things that could happen.
If Nest is the one horse where I could say that filly with the body of work that she's done this year is like a definite should be considered horse of the year. But I could not say that about Flightline. And I could not, you know, yes, Pletcher gave Life is Good a break, and Life is Good came back and has won some solid races. But he didn't really fire in the Saudi Cup. He didn't fire in Dubai. He had the break. He won off the layoff. Epicenter has been pretty solid all year. You know, and his campaign's been good. The Triple Crown races, he wasn't to be found. I mean, he was there. He didn't win them. And then come summer, he's back into the horse he was pre-Triple Crown, you know, in terms of winning, right? He's back on his winning path. So the only horse really right now, in my opinion, that you can make a case for that definitely has a lot of foundation to stand on for horse of the year is Nest. With the boys, it's almost wide open. It's who wins the Classic.
I'll tell you this, okay? Now, you know, I love to bet the horses. Okay?
Right.
Since I'm a kid. I think you know that I've been known to play a little chess and even some big money chess games. Okay?
Right.
And I grew up playing poker my entire life. I used to deal in the clubs in Brooklyn and playing the games when I wasn't dealing. So part of those 2 games is handicapping people. Okay.
Right.
It's reading people. And I will say this, in my opinion, and I would bet on this, if Flightline makes the Classic and runs well, as in 1, 2, 3, even if Tiber runs past him in the stretch like he was standing still, okay, Tiber would get 3-year-old. Well, I don't even know that Tiber would get 3-year-old of the year. He would deserve it, but he might not get it because I'm not even going to go down that bias of how they're going to vote. But I still would bet money that they would make Flightline horse of the year, even off the Breeders' Cup loss, if he runs well. He would have to completely tank to not get it. And I think if he scratches on the morning of the race, I think they'll still give him horse of the year, especially if Tiber wins.
Huh. Yeah.
And I bet money on that. I bet money on that.
Well, and again, right, most of these Eclipse Awards are voted
on. Right. It's not right, but
no. Exactly. It's voted on by opinion by turf riders. And you know, what's very interesting is, because I remember when I worked with a horse, very good horse at Mandela's called the Tin Man. And there was all this chatter, English Channel and Cacique are the best 2 horses, grass horses. Like, wait a second, what have these grass horses won? And it's like, oh, well, they're so good. And it's like, the Tin Man's had a pretty good season, very good campaign. He's won every race he's running this season. And then they're like, well, nobody can beat English Channel and Cacique. And what happened? They got beat in the Arlington Million. And then coming out, everybody still wants to say English Channel and Cacique, best horses. The only reason why the Tin Man did not run that year in the turf Okay. Tin Man had something called sheared heels. Basically, one heel bulb was a little bit higher than the other. So he used to train in a bar shoe, and then he'd typically be shot in a regular shoe to run sometimes. I don't think we ever ran him in a bar shoe. I can't remember. But there was this new shoe that came in vogue all at once, and it was called the Polyflex shoe. And it was a glue-on shoe that allowed the hoof, supposedly, to move as the hoof should naturally, which for a horse with a situation like him could have been extremely helpful. Okay. It would have benefited him. The shoe did not. The horse ran, had an issue, and we missed the Breeders' Cup because his feet were bothering him and Richard wouldn't run it. So had that horse run, might have been a different case scenario of who's the best grass horse in the country. But as we see over and over again, East Coast, West Coast biases, most turf riders are on the East Coast anyways, just because of more tracks, more races, and more jobs back east. But it's so interesting when you see people who get so excited about a horse, they're just going to vote him whether he deserves it or not. And if he gets beat, if Flightline gets beat, and everybody gets beat, right? American Pharoah got beat in the Traverse. Bernardini got beat in the Classic by Invasor. And does it diminish what Flightline is as a racehorse? Yes, but it goes back to what we've discussed, body of work. His body of work hasn't been good enough this year that if he got beat in the Classic, that he should still deserve Horse of the Year. He's won, what, 3 races this season?
Right.
Right? That's not enough.
Right. No, I get it. I don't think much of the Eclipse Awards. But that's a whole nother story. I don't even want to go down that road. I got my own reasons. But it's interesting. Another interesting short price horse, I think, is going to be very, very short price. Even coming in off a loss, Jackie's Warrior in the spring.
Yeah.
I think it'll be short price. Take a world of money, boatload of money. Buy a couple of mansions with the money that horse is going to take on Breeders' Cup. There you got Flightline, Nest, Jackie's Warrior, Cave Rock. Modern Games lost at Ascot the other day. He's probably coming to the mile. If he runs back to the race he ran at Woodbine and some of his other races, he's going to be extremely tough. He might have had a legitimate excuse at Ascot. William Buick said he just really wasn't getting his feet out of that turf course. He likes a much firmer turf course. He's done his best racing in North America on firmer turf courses. I think he's going to take a lot of that Godolphin, Appleby, Buick money, and had he won at Ascot on Saturday, he probably would have been one of the 5 shortest prices, like we mentioned the other 4. Now maybe he'll be a little, a couple of ticks above that, but still probably going to take a lot of money. It's a really interesting lineup from a wagering perspective, and the championship implications that we discussed, and the biases and how they'll play out, and most importantly, how these horses perform on the racetrack on the big day. I've always felt, and you alluded to this, I think that you probably agree, it's an advantage to be in the state or as close to the track that they're running at as possible. If I was ever fortunate enough to have a Breeders' Cup or a Derby horse, I would be one of the early ship-in guys, not one of the late ship-in guys. I'd like to be there, settled in.
Well, and it's interesting, and Asmussen's done a phenomenal job over the years at that. And what people don't understand about shipping in, you've got 2 routes literally you can go, and Baffert usually does the latter one, which I'm going to discuss. If you need to ship in, if you're going to ship in early, 30 days plus, okay? Because as horses get used to new racetrack, there's going to be about a 30-day acclimation period. Things are going to pop up that they didn't have before. It might have been perfectly fine at Belmont, and all of a sudden an ankle pops up. or something interesting pops up. Like if you see the guys who win Saratoga every year, it's Chad and Todd. When are Chad and Todd up in Saratoga? Before the meet. Okay. They're up there getting their horses ready. So they're ready to fire as soon as the meet opens. It's a conversation I had with a trainer this year. And, we were discussing, and they said, next year I'm coming in early because I noticed it took a couple of weeks for the horse to get ready to go and fire at the meet. Right.
Interesting.
So typically 30 days is what you wanted to do. And I remember when Keeneland came, and he struggled with that synthetic surface when he came to California, but he literally won. What was the race he won? I thought it was the Suburban that he won, but I'm wrong. He won at Belmont, got on the plane that night, showed up in California the next morning, and had at least 5 weeks at Santa Anita training on the synthetic to take on Zenyatta. And that was him. So Asmussen will usually go in very early. You've seen it when he sent Keeneland to Dubai 2 months before the Dubai World Cup. He gave that horse plenty of time to acclimate. So you either go 30 days or beyond to give that horse time to acclimate. You fall in a window, 3 weeks can get a little hairy. 2 weeks, not very good, right? Because you're going to come in, you're going to spend a week on the track, and you're going to breeze once, and you're going to run. Okay. Still, things can pop up. Or you do what Baffert does, which is what Bob's always taught me, is they ship in 4 or 5 days before the race. They literally get your work done, get everything organized, show up, do some light exercise, keep the horse happy and healthy, and then just run them, because it's not enough time for anything to pop up. If they're going to get sick, it's not necessarily going to happen 3 or 4 days before the race, right? You're not pushing on them. You're not training them. You're literally just keeping them together until race day.
Gotcha.
You get into those hairier things, and it'll be interesting to see what Sadler does with Flightline, because right now he's at the 3-week mark. Okay. Another week is at the 2-week mark, right? So it'll be interesting how he gets that horse here to be ready on the day. Hopefully he chooses the ladder and says, we're going to do everything in California. We're going to show up, put winter blankets on this horse, and just run him right off the plane.
Right. And that, if you go back to the guy who created that, it was, Coach Wayne Lucas, Wayne off the plane. That's what we used to say in New York when he used to ship in from California. He would ship in off the plane, and they would take him from Kennedy Airport to the starting gate, Wayne off the plane, and they would win, So there's something to be said for that. That's interesting. I never really thought about that window and looking at that when I look at horses. That's something I'm going to start to pay attention to, because I think it's interesting and makes a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, and it's very similar of like every racetrack is different. Every single surface is different. So the horse's body changes based on the surface that they're on. They get used to it.
Right.
But if you give them enough time to where it's, hey, I've galloped a week and I've got 3 breezes over the surface and I run because you're at 30 days. Well, that's plenty of time that on race day, you're still right where you need them to be. But when you get into different scenarios where it's like, I galloped a week, I breezed, something popped up, now I've missed a work, now that work is pushed too close and I've missed something that needed to happen, because as we said, these other horses are 100% on the day. So what you're trying to prevent is either missed training, because there will be things that pop up along the way. These are race horses. They don't wake up 100% every single day. There's always something small that happens while you prepare a horse for a race. Good trainers are able to navigate that and make sure that the horse keeps ticking forward, right? Let's say an ankle got inflamed. Doesn't mean that it's a big problem. It means that there's a little problem. So instead of breezing back in 7 days, you might jog for 2-3 days, make sure everything's 100%, get back on your training program and breeze them 9 days after that last work. So you need to give yourself enough windows when you're going to a new environment to provide that you don't lose training and don't lose those opportunities to peak them on race day, because everybody else is coming in hot and they're making sure that they are, which is why, but it's also environmental stuff, which is always interesting, plays a much bigger factor in that window period versus they got used to the allergens. Like Kentucky allergens are horrendous this time of year. And so what people don't understand is horses still have these same issues that humans do. Sometimes you'll go in and you'll be you'll be at a racetrack, and every racetrack has its own thing, right? So Saratoga is known for bleeders. You have a horse that have never bled before, go to Saratoga, you'll get a bleeder. Del Mar is known for horses getting sick. Temperature fluctuations, right? So it'll be 90 degrees in the afternoon, and it'll be 60 degrees at night with a cold breeze off the ocean. So you'll get horses with snotty noses, green mucus, and they get sick at Del Mar, right? I was talking to a trainer who's based in Kentucky last year, and he says, Mike, I'm getting all this foamy white mucus. I said, well, you're sniffling, right? And he says, yeah. I said, allergens. The allergens are in the air, right? All these horses are going through an allergen adjustment period. Some will clear it and be fine and go on. Others will, and nobody ever thinks about horses with allergens. So same thing, try and change, either show up as you would as a human athlete, to play a sport. Super Bowl players aren't there 2 weeks in advance.
Right.
They show up a couple days before, get off, make sure that they're okay, fit, nothing's wrong. Okay, let's play. Let's go.
Right. No, interesting. I'm excited about the Breeders' Cup. We'll be there all week. We'll have a lot of great Past the Wire TV, unfiltered, uncensored. Really looking forward to some of the stuff we're going to do. I'm sure everybody watching will enjoy it. We're going to bring you some unique content and unique perspectives from the Breeders' Cup, and I'm looking forward to it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it the right way. The seminar that we do every year, I'm really looking forward to this year more than most, because I've got some, really strong opinions and angles and things that I'm really looking forward to. So we'll see how all of that plays out. And, I think we're going to see some really great racing and some really great performances and some interesting surprises as well. Like we said, everybody you think is going to win is not going to win. Right. These are very competitive races and very, interesting races, and, conceding victory to anybody in the Breeders' Cup, 3 weeks out before they even draw the races is, foolish in my opinion.
Well, and I think what's so interesting this year, and maybe, who knows, maybe because I've been at Saratoga and I've been other tracks around the country and seen a lot of these horses, I think the depth in this year's Breeders' Cup is substantial compared to years previous. In every division, there is a significant amount of depth in each race. And so, I said it on a previous show with John, I'm not a handicapper. That's not my game. I handicap, try and find horses to buy, to claim. I understand how to look at a race, to figure out how to place a horse from a horseman's angle. But knowing how deep this Breeders' Cup is, I think it's foolish in a lot of situations to go with heavy favorites, because I think in each race, there's 4 to 5 horses that could easily beat other horses.
No doubt. Another very short price horse you're probably going to have is Golden Pal.
Yeah. And when the real sprinters show up, now granted, we could say it's either he doesn't like Europe because he's never won outside the United States, right? Every time he goes to Europe, he gets butt kicked, and then he comes back and then he wins. So it's either he's facing better horses in Europe, or he can't fire outside of the United States because he doesn't like the going over there. But that's very interesting, because if you get any of these European sprinters to come over on the grass, it could be interesting to see if it's just the fact that he's out of his depth in Europe, or if he's legit. Because the one thing, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand, and I had somebody send me a filly a couple weeks ago wanting to sell me this 2-year-old juvenile filly to run in the Breeders' Cup juvenile turf. And I thought, heck, maybe I could put a group of guys together and we could buy her and we could run her in the juvenile fillies. And I look at it and
I think I was one of the guys, right? That was.
Oh yeah, I called you, I said, John. So, but as I did research, everything on this filly's page, her dad was a very good 5 furlong sprinter. Her mother was a very good 5 furlong sprinter. Both of them were 2-year-olds that never ran on a 3. And I told those individuals, I said, I'm really appreciative that you've reached out to me for this filly, because I think she's nice. But if she cannot go 1.25 miles I've got no reason to buy her, because literally in the United States, we have the poorest turf sprinting program around for both girls and boys. You have nothing for 3-year-olds really. And then once you're 4, you can maybe find a race here or there, but there's nobody in those divisions. So that's the real question. Is Golden Pal just the best in the United States and gets beat up by Europeans because they do have those turf sprint divisions in Europe? Or is it because he doesn't like the going in Europe? So I think we'll find out a lot on Breeders' Cup Day.
And, I don't think anybody's really sure yet which Europeans are coming. I mean, there's some that we think are coming. There's some that we think are not coming. But there are a couple that if they come, they can run,
Yeah.
And there's a couple that I'm
hoping. 2-year-old filly. They need to bring the 2-year-old filly, put her in the race, huh?
That one from Ireland, is that the one you're talking about?
There was one in France. It was interesting. Okay. So they put out this thing. It was on Arc Day, and it was what did it say? The first time a 2-year-old has won this race in over X amount of years. And I'm thinking, first time a 2-year-old has won this race in X amount of years. What is this race condition? Right. It was a 5-furlong turf sprint on Arc Day. I think it was a Group 1 or Group 2. I can't remember. For 2-year-olds and upward, the 2-year-old filly beat Olders.
Wow.
Yeah, in a group race in France. I'm thinking, holy smokes, is this thing something else that a 2-year-old is going to take on Olders and manhandle them?
Yeah, no, that's pretty impressive. There's one in Ireland that's pretty good too if she comes, but
yeah,
nobody knows yet who's coming, who's not. But we'll track them down that week and
absolutely
and eyeball them all and see what they're like, and maybe even get some interesting conversation with some of their connections and trainers. So should be a lot of fun. Unfiltered, Past the Wire TV. We're back. Sorry for the little hiatus, unexpected that we took. Things happen. The show must go on though, so we're here, we're back, we're getting ready for the Breeders' Cup, and we will see you all there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, looking forward to it, John. It should be exciting.
We'll be back next week with more, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Ciao for now.
Have a great day.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
With some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.